everyone. Welcome back to the True Shallot Seeds webinar 2020 organized by Wageningen. My name is Adi Bahtiar from Yayasan Bina Tani Sejahtera, and I will be your moderator for the second session of today's webinar. Like the previous one, please mention that this webinar will be recorded. So if you missed out the first session of today's webinar, you can rewatch the video on our YouTube channel, or we can also share the presentation slides on the link provided by our team. Yeah, and due to the large number of participants, your microphone is disabled during this webinar. So if you have any questions regarding these topics, you can write it down and drop it on the Q&A chat box. Okay, in this session, we're gonna be talking about shallot applied research and best practices of growing shallot seed bulbs and post-harvest management. And this session will take more or less an hour and a half. At first, we have experts from Wageningen University and Research, and also AgriPro Focus. Yeah, we'll tell you something more about this topic. Yeah, as you can see them on the poster, yeah, on our social media. First, we have Herman the tutor from Wageningen University and Research. Herman has been working as a researcher at Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands since 1993. And he's involved in the shallot track of the Wageningen since 2018. We also have with us today Ibrahim Palas from AgriPro Focus as the new business coordinator. He is also accompanied by his colleagues, Ibu Tasnim Abdul Jalil as country coordinator AgriPro Focus Indonesia, and Maria Liliana as country network facilitator AgriPro Focus Indonesia. Okay, I will just shortly kick off the session with Herman. Start first for about 30 minutes, 25 minutes for the presentation, and 10 minutes for the Q&A session. And after that, Ibrahim and his colleagues will end this session. I will now hand over to Herman to start the presentation. Herman, are you ready?
I hope so. I think so. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yeah, it's very clear. Yeah, please, Herman.
Good. Yeah, I will start sharing. Yeah, so I hope that this is visible for everybody now. So I have opened my presentation and I will share a bit on the research on the shallot applied research we did together with YBTS, East West, and Jurgen Sumbawan, PT Sumbawan, and the Groot en Slot. So at the start of all the experiments and all the activities, we sat together and we discussed what are possible tracks. And I think Ibu Irin and Witono already mentioned that we start with seeds and we have to end with consumption. But there are different pathways. So from seeds, first you need to raise mini bulbs maybe, or you use a direct sowing track, or you produce transplants first and then you end up with consumption bulbs. And with the experiments, we have compared all those paths and see what's now the best way in terms of agronomy. So I will not talk about economy, but more on what's now the production. We also looked into the wet season and dry season. So TSS is quite different from the traditional shallot production. And I think the most important one is that farmers need to realize it's a two-step cultivation. First, you need to prepare starting material if you don't opt for direct sowing, and then you produce for consumption. So in 2019, we did several tests at Purwakarta at the location of PTA Window and at Sumbawa at the location of PT Sumbawang. We used Sanren at Purwakarta and Materi was used at Sumbawa. And as I already explained, we compared the direct sowing with transplants and mini bulbs, and we compared those with the Bima Churut as a standard as for the current situation. And I have to say that we use high quality Bima bulbs. So the average for the Bima will be higher than I think in normal situations. We did it in 3 seasons. We started early in 2019. We did a test in the mid-season, and at Purwakarta we also had a late production, starting in the dry season still, and the harvest was just at the beginning of the wet season. And besides, we also did a small demonstration to see what's the effect of the quality of transplants on the final production, together with PTA Window in Garut. This is a picture just to show you that we started first with mini bulb production. Because we wanted to have mini bulbs in the test, we had to produce mini bulbs first. We did that in Indramayu, close to Cirebon, and the picture shows the temperature and the rainfall during the period of raising the mini bulbs, and for that we used direct sowing. So we immediately sow the seeds in the field to end up with mini bulbs, or we used also for mini bulb production transplants first, raised in nurseries, and then later transplanted in the field. And the lines on top of the graph, underneath direct sowing, you see an orange line. It indicates the field period of the seeds till the bulbs in the field. The line underneath nursery indicates this was the period that the seeds were raised in the nursery until we had transplants. After that, they were transplanted in the field to produce mini bulbs. It was really rainy during that period, so we used covers at the initial stage. Sanren was used, direct sowing. With that method, we used 2 densities, 700 or 1,000 seeds per square meter. And for the transplant method to raise mini bulbs, in the nursery phase, we used 5 grams or 10 grams per square meter. And after it was transplanted, all at the same density at 5 by 10 centimeters. So at harvest, D1 and D2 means that's direct sowing treatments with 750 or 1,000 seeds per square meter immediately in the field. Then between the seed densities, you can see a slight difference between the low and the high density, that it was about 3 kilos per square meter for the low density and 3.6 kilos per square meter for the high density. While with the transplant method for raising mini bulbs, then you can already see that the yield was lower than with the direct sowing, and also that with a higher density in the nursery, later with the same density after transplanting, that still those bulbs had a higher yield. We also looked at what's now the impact of the different treatments on the mini bulb grades. There were no significant differences when looking at the separate grades, but of course, when we noticed at the previous slide already, there is a significant difference between density on the total production. Unfortunately, the bulbs that we raised at Indramayu, like I said, it was during the wet season, so the rain was really hampering the quality. There was a lot of fusarium and other soil-borne issues, so we could harvest bulbs, but those bulbs were really infested by all those issues, so the storability was low, so we could not store the mini bulbs to be used in the experiments later. So I think that's already an important conclusion, that production of mini bulbs is very sensitive. And also it means that mini bulbs most likely will be very difficult to obtain at the start of the season after the wet season, because production is difficult and also storage is difficult then. We had a similar experiment at Lembang. At the photo you can see the method we used there. They were always covered, so there was always a screen on top of the mini bulbs. There were 3 varieties in this case: Trisula, Sanren and Maserati. Only the sowing densities we differed, so there was no transplanting, only direct sowing with 750 seeds per square meter or 1,000 seeds per square meter. Also the climate during the raising period in Lembang was quite wet. So in the graph you can see all those bars indicating rainfall, that from day to day, the rainfall was over 50 millimeters a day. And in Lembang, we also concluded that seed quality is very important. In the graph at the left, you can see the emergence or establishment. So how many seeds did produce a seedling? And when we look at days after sowing, 119 days after sowing at Trisula, it was less than 10%, while at the Maserati and Sanren, it was close to 30%. So that's also due to the wet season, but also the seed quality had a big impact. So that also meant that when we look at the yield in the right graph, that the differences between 100 seeds or 75 seeds sowing density was not that big, but Maserati and Sanren produced a better production than the Trisula, but that was mainly due to the emergence and the establishment. So it's not a variety issue. For Purwakarta, we had 3 tests. In the box on top of the graph, you can find different lines indicating the field period for the different experiments. So if you look at experiment 1 in the box, you find 4 lines. The red line indicates the field period for the traditional Bima. The line on top of that indicates the field period for direct sowing. And the green lines indicate the transplant. And then you can see a low line and a high line. And the low line indicates the nursery phase. And the high line indicates the field phase. Below those boxes, you find information on climate. Temperature was between 20-30 degrees. And the blue bars indicate the precipitation per day. And you can note that there was quite some rainfall, especially during the first experiment at the starting phase. While the second experiment was grown more during a dry period, and the last experiment, you can see that halfway that experiment, also a few showers were influencing that experiment. When we look at yield after drying, so this is not a fresh yield, but we harvested the bulbs and we dry them for a few days. And then this is the yield in tons per hectare after that field drying. Then you can see early, mid, and late. So those represents the 3 experiments. Early. At Bima, you can see that it's close to 14 tons per hectare. So as I already explained, we used high quality Bima seed bulbs. And I think in reality, if it's more closer to 10, it's more realistic. And when we then compare direct sowing, then we noticed that early the direct sowing, due to the climatic conditions, due to the rainfall, the direct sowing was not performing too well. While at the mid experiment, the direct sowing is performing quite well. So season has a big impact on the performance of TSS in relation to the methods you use. During the mid experiment and the late experiment, we also included mini bulb, and you can see that also the mini bulb is producing quite high yields. And the transplants also at all experiments performed well. So the conclusion of this experiment at Purwakarta was that it's difficult to have mini bulbs at the early stage. That's also the reason why we didn't include it at the early experiment. Transplants are performing throughout the whole year, and direct sowing, that's more suitable for a dry period. Sumbawa, it's similar to what we did at Purwakarta, only with a different variety and different location. And we only had 2 experiments. And the climatic data also indicates that the temperature was slightly higher, and also the precipitation was much, much less. It's only at the start of the experiments that you can see a few showers, and after that, it remained dry. So the same picture, an early experiment at the end of the wet season, start of the dry season, and then mid was the really dry season. And there too you can see that the BIMA was performing quite well, especially at the early experiment with a yield over 20 tons per hectare, dried yield, not fresh. Also there, the direct sowing at the early stage was performing less good as in the mid experiment. So also the conclusion here is that transplants will perform always, but direct sowing is really depending on the season. I think, I'm not sure because my Bahasa Indonesia is not so good, but I think also Irin explained how to raise seedlings, and that seedling quality has a big impact. We also did a small test at Garut with seedlings from different origins. So we had seedlings from a farmer, we had seedlings that were raised at Garut, and we had seedlings from Purwakarta. We did some measurements on length and root development, and we planted them, of course, and at the end we looked at yield. So we had here 4 sourcing for transplants. Farmer, 1. So the seedlings were uprooted 1 day before planting, and then, yeah, based on the logistics, it takes a day before you can really plant them. So when you think about business of seedling, then also think about logistics, because the impression is also that the duration between uprooting and final planting can have a big impact. Although the results were not significant reliable, the impression was still there that the quality, the source has a big impact, but also the duration of the period between uprooting and final planting. Also, the main effect was caused by the survival rate. So when we looked at Purwakarta, the logistics were as such that it took 4 days between uprooting the seedlings from the nursery and planting. And there you can really see that the survival rate was much lower than for the others. So the conclusions of all those experiments, and there is a lot more to say, and I have to say that I only show a limited number of results, but hopefully at the end of the year, we will publish a full report on all the activities. But the main conclusion so far is that mini bulb production is difficult to obtain high quality for storing to bridge the wet season until the dry season. TSS direct sowing seems not to be suitable for an early start due to the climatic conditions still. TSS transplant give good results for all seasons. And for transplants, think about transplant quality in terms of logistics, age, and source. So the age of the transplant can also have an impact on the final production. So based on all those activities and based on discussions and observations, then final considerations should be made in relation to farm strategy. All the paths are possible, but think about the consequences. Think about what's the impact on my farm and the vision that you have on your farm. TSS is not something that can replace the traditional bimature route. You really have to think about how to use it, how to implement. TSS starting material, you need additional time. Conventional is just using bulbs from a previous crop, but for TSS you have to think about making starting material or use direct sowing. So that really has a big impact on the farm strategy. With direct sowing, think about the soil type, because also with direct sowing, I did not show you the results, but there is a high seed loss. At the end, maybe only 10 to 15% of the seeds will form a plant in the end. Think about manual or machine sowing, because labor, as was shown before by the presenters, has a big share in the total cost. Weed control, especially in direct sowing, it's even more essential to think about it, because with direct sowing, your field period is extended from 2 months to almost 3 months. So the time that you need to control weeds in your field is extended by 1 month. And also, in terms of farm strategy, you have to think about land efficiency, because it takes 1 month longer, so you cannot use your field more times in the season. For mini bulb, think about the storage and also the availability at the start of the dry season. And also so far, there is no organized raising of mini bulbs with certification, and also there is no clear differentiation between starting material and consumption material. So a producer might start with mini bulbs, but suppose that consumption prices are so high, he might sell all the mini bulbs. For transplanting, I think it was already mentioned also that think about buying them from a specialist or raising them self, but think then about the cash or the investment needed. And with transplants, it's very important to think about planning, because transplants are vulnerable, susceptible, so you cannot keep them for a long time. Or if your field is not available, yeah, then you're stuck with your transplant. So when you think about transplant system, you have to have a keen eye on the planning. Make sure that the transplants are ready when you want to plant them, and the other way around, make sure that your field is ready when your transplants are ready. So it really has to do with mindset. With TSS, a farmer needs to have the skills and have the mindset to use it.
Okay, Herman, your time is 1 minute left.
Yeah, I'm almost done. So I would like to thank still all those persons listed on this sheet, because without them, it was not possible to do all those experiments. And no doubt I will forget people, because there are also the field staff of PT Window and PT Sumbawang were very helpful in assisting and carrying out all those experiments. So they need to be mentioned as well. So thank you a lot. And I hope to see in the near future a profitable and sustainable true shallot seed production.
Yeah. Yeah,
thank you.
We say thank you in Bahasa, so I would like to say thank you in the Netherlands, in Dutch. Dank u wel, Herman, for
Dank
your
u.
interesting presentation and insightful figures from your research. So maybe I can start asking you the first questions, which is coming in from Freddy Simatupang. Yeah, I would like to, I will translate it to English because this is in Bahasa. Did you find any significant differences in terms of maybe yields or others when you grow shallot at greenhouse and in the field?
Yeah, we haven't compared that, but I can imagine that in the greenhouse yield levels will be higher. But in terms of economics, it's not always the best solution, especially with shallots. I'm not sure if greenhouse will be a real benefit for that.
Okay, yeah. The next question is coming in from our field staff, YBTS field staff from Southeast Maluku, Linda. Yeah, as you mentioned on your slide that you classify the product of the shallot into grade A, B, and C. Yeah, What is your references and or standard of using that grade?
Okay. Yes, grading is always a big problem in Indonesia. To what kind of grade should we use? And we discussed also on that. And as a team, we set limits that we said, if I'm not mistaken, grade C are bulbs smaller than 1.5 centimeters. B are bulbs between 1.5 and 2.5 centimeters. And C are bulbs larger than 2.5 centimeters. And we realized that now also the selling of bulbs, also the consumption bulbs is not really based on grades. But I think especially with TSS, when you see that also the TSS produce larger bulbs than the traditional bulbs, it would be very beneficial if also the market and the trade will set different prices for different grades.
Have you also carried out like a market research before?
I think that will be presented tomorrow.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, the next question is coming in from Indra Gunawan Sutikno. Yeah, if we use TSS, can we reduce the use of pesticides?
I hope that also speakers on the pest control will address that question tomorrow. I don't, yeah, in a way it could be, but then more focused on diseases. Pesticides used for pests like Spodoptera, I don't see that with TSS it will be reduced. With direct sowing even, the period will be longer in the field. So maybe you need more pesticides to control the Spodoptera because there is a longer period that the product is in the field. On the other hand, when you use TSS seeds, it's free from virus, it's free from diseases. So expect you need to use less pesticides to control those issues. Yeah. But we didn't test that in our experiments right now.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And again, and the next question is from Retno Pangestuti. How to keep quality of TSS transplant in distribution? How long it will be stay fresh? Yeah,
that's also something that we would like to investigate more. So logistics and planning, therefore, is very important for transplants. Make sure that the best way is to immediately uproot and transplant. If you want to transport, make sure that it's packed well, that you only transport healthy ones, good ones, high quality ones. Maybe make sure that the moisture level is not too high, not too low in the package. So I have ideas for that, but no real clear forward instructions for that right now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the next question is from Ricky Sianipar. you mentioned that seed quality is very important. Based on your research in Lembang, from the second graph, if I'm not mistaken, can you more explain how do you get 22 to 25 kilograms per meter square from 75 to 100 seeds?
It seems to be two questions in one question. Seed quality is indeed important because the higher the germination and higher the establishment rate, the more production, the more plants you have, the higher the production will be. So if you start with TSS, the quality of the seeds that you buy or purchase should be high. So also the production system for TSS seeds should be at the best place as possible to avoid any reduction in germination. And then the second part of the question was, how did we obtain the kilos per square meter? Was just by harvesting the product and counting the product. And that depends on the establishment rate. The more bulbs you have, the higher the production per square meter. Is that the answer to the question, I hope?
Yeah, we hope so. As the time is keep running, so maybe I can just move on to the next question from Sulhan Abidin. If we use the mini bulb, will there be any increase in the offspring, the production of the offspring?
Then I have to dig deep again to remember the data. But if I'm not mistaken, if I look at the mini bulb, it has an impact on splits and on the final grade of the consumption bulbs. That's what I remember, but how exactly, I don't know. But I noticed that when you use mini bulbs, it has a slight different effect on the splits and also then the bulb size.
Yeah, okay. Herman, the final question is from John Hardy. Do you also have any information, or did you also compare to another variety like tuk tuk? Because on your slide or your research, you just mentioned 3 varieties.
Yeah. We considered that at the start of the experiments, what should we compare? And there were so many factors and parameters that we could include, but due to time limitations and budget limitation, we could not compare all. So we had to refrain ourselves in comparing all those aspects. Initially, we wanted to have both Sanren and Maserati at both locations, but that was already too complicated. So we had to restrict ourselves to what we did. So BIMA as a reference with 1 variety of the participating company. So that's why we ended up with Sanren at PT Window and with Maserati at PT Sumbawa.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Herman. I think the time is up. So thank you very much for your presentation and also your sharing knowledge.